So there are a couple of just housekeeping things I want to do before we get started. First, thank you to the Vineyard Haven Public Library as usual. I just, I get so used to Anne being on here helping us out and their support that sometimes I forget to say anything about it. So even if you're not living in Vineyard Haven or even on the island, be sure to check out their events page on their website because they do have quite a number of online offerings that they're still doing. And of course, anybody from anywhere can participate. And I know that they would love you and your interest to be part of their classes. The second thing I wanted to mention, because I really hadn't had a chance to talk about it much during the course of the summer, is that I also host and sponsor a drawing competition called the Martha's Vineyard Drawing Prize. And the deadline is in September, the end of September, 27th, I believe it is. And this year's concept or theme is questions. So that could be questions about something you've seen, something you're not, you look down a path, you don't know where it's going. You might have a question about that. I mean, the word questions is pretty broad, isn't it? You can think of a lot of things, but you can enter up to 3 drawings for the $10 entry fee. And so you can do 1 or you can do 2 or 3 drawings and put them in. And I wanted to mention it to you because I know a number of you feel that perhaps you're not ready to enter a competition or something like that. But if nothing else, even if you don't want to enter, I'd like you to go to the Martha's Vineyard Drawing Prize website, the mvdrawingprize.com, or to their Instagram, the Instagram page. There's a MV Drawing Prize Instagram, and there's also an MV Drawing Prize Showcase Instagram. And both of those show not only the winners, but the Showcase Instagram page shows all 400 and something entries from last year. And I'm suggesting you go look at this because there are more types of drawing and styles of drawing or ways of drawing than you could possibly imagine, that I could possibly cover even in an entire summer. And to see all of these people who've really taken their drawing, to quite an extensive degree, I think it would really be, fun for you to check out. So if you haven't done that before, don't know about the competition, it's in its 3rd year this year. And it's really amazing to me, the range of different styles that I'm seeing. So anyway, have a look for that. And what was the other thing? Oh, yes, colored pencils. Next week, it's colored pencils, drawing plants and what did I say? Plants and vegetables, yeah. So I didn't want it just to be about flowers, even though flowers are, a part of this. Colored pencils can be used for doing some very pretty types of drawing, but they can also be used, in a little edgier way. And I want to show you both methods with colored pencil. However, if you don't feel like investing in colored pencils or don't have any around, not sure if you've got the right ones, whatever, you can do everything that we're going to be doing just using a regular pencil and white paper. So there's nothing special that's needed. I've accumulated quite a number of colored pencils over the years. And one of the things that's a bit annoying about them is they don't necessarily mix well. You tend to, if you want greens of different types, rather than in paint, you would just put a little more yellow, a little more blue in. With colored pencils, you tend to need, 4 or 5 greens to get the range. So if you're not sure whether you want to go ahead and do that yet, I would say just draw along with regular pencil and you'll be fine. And you can sort of see what I do, what I suggest, and whether you'd like to try it. Either way, it'll be fun, it'll be good. And one of the things that will be very useful for those of you who are wanting to draw better so that you can paint better or start painting, this will be a class where I start talking about how color works, how reflected lights work, how underlayers under other colors work, because colored pencil and painting are not that far apart from each other in that way. So if nothing else, it'll be useful information for that sort of thing as well. Okay, let's see, my cell service seems to be holding, so we'll go ahead and share this screen and I'll get started with what we're going to do today. Okay, welcome back. Whoops. I'm so eager to go on with the class that I'm zooming ahead. All right, welcome back to Summer of Drawing. And we're on class number 14. Can you believe it? What a summer. So today we're talking about mixed media abstraction 2. So once again, mixed media is just whatever you have on hand that you feel that you would like to draw with. You can mix it up. It can be different types of drawing materials. It can be adding in paint. It can be ink, pencil, this, that, and the other. Or if you're just working with a regular pencil and you don't have charcoal and Conte crayon and all of those things around, you can just try using different pressure, using your pencil in different ways, either the point or the side of it, to get different sorts of strokes. Basically, the idea with mixed media and abstraction is that you'll be able to be a little more expressive the more variety that you're pulling into your drawing. So that could be variety just with the 1 or 2 pencils you have, or it can be variety by pulling in lots of different types of drawing media. So just quickly to go over this, I don't know why I put it up in the corner, but here it is. So abstraction from a definition point of view is a quality of dealing with ideas and freedom from representational qualities in art. But like I said before, we don't have to dump the baby with the bathwater. We can still have some degree of representational art and abstraction at the same time. Or we can go completely away and have nothing in the work that is representational at all. So I kept in there the part of the definition that said a state of preoccupation, because I find that when one is doing abstraction, that actually being a little preoccupied, like listening to music or you know, not overly concentrating on the details of what you're looking at, but thinking instead of a concept, having some idea or words in your head that you're operating from, something that stops you from being distracted by all that information that your brain is always sending you. That part is always, you know, something to consider. So, and the process of considering something independently of its associations. So you could do a vase or something like that, but perhaps it's not on a table with a background and this, that, and the other. Perhaps it's, you know, just by itself, and who knows what the background is. So it's a way of pulling away from that sort of photographic representation of art or the world around us. And the process of removing something, I left that part of the definition in there as well, because, you know, once again, sometimes less is more, right? We don't have to do a wall-to-wall representation, a duplicate of the photo reference or whatever it happens to be. You know, learning to edit, learning to take things away, I think is a very important part of the entire process. So I wanted to show you really quickly my version of the Gannonoak waterfront barge factory from last week. I had set out, like probably many of you, with the idea that I was going to, hey, I'm going to do all 3 of those this week, and I'm going to show them, you know, next Wednesday. And guess what? I did 1. I got 1 done before I got distracted by other things. So this is what I ended up doing. That at the top is my little sketch I did in the 10 minutes we had last class. There's the photograph that we were looking at, and there's the Maurice Wade painting that was sort of the inspiration for this. And so I took about, I'd say probably about 45 minutes to do the little drawing over on the left, which is more careful. And it also incorporates not just what I saw I didn't just go back to the photo. I looked also at my little sketch where I had been trying to make those decisions on the fly about what should be red, what shouldn't be red, you know, what should be dark, what should not be dark, what should be flat. And I tried to incorporate some of that in my little drawing. Now I had to stop because I was starting to get details in there that didn't need to be. I was just drawing away and having fun. And, you know, I had to pull back and go, stop that. You know, you wanted that look like Maurice Wade, and Maurice Wade doesn't put every darn detail in there, and you're not going to do it either. And then I also it was interesting to try to figure out what to do with the foreground, which as a painter, I would treat very differently. So I tried to look at how Maurice Wade kind of handled the land over to the left and tried to do something like it. So I thought it was really instructive. And I am going to go ahead and do the other 2 types as well, just because it's a different exercise. So when I talk about, you know, drawing in the style of someone, you know, not just maybe copying a masterwork, which is always useful, but maybe trying to incorporate somebody's style in a drawing just for the exercise of it. This is what I mean. You don't have to go crazy and do an entire painting or drawing, but just a little taste of trying to think like another artist thinks is extremely useful. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit, kind of pulling some things that we've been discussing this summer together, about how we go about deciding what to draw and why abstraction might be something that we would end on as opposed to realism, or maybe some combination of the 2. So if we're going to break it down, like journalists and writers, you know, if you've taken a writing course, they always talk about the 5 W's, you know, who, what, where, when, and why. And so for artists, I was trying to think of an equivalent, and it's a little clunky. It's what, why, how, and how. So let me explain what I mean. So what happens is we see something that appeals to us, like, okay, here's that amazing 1950s car. Wow, I'd love to draw that. I just love it. And so the next step of that is the why. Why did that idea appeal to me? Well, I think it's important to actually be able to figure that out, to actually even write it down. Why did that idea appeal to me? So for example, I was captivated by the design of the car, let's say, and maybe the nostalgia of the 1950s. So maybe those are two different things. So then when it comes to how am I going to draw that? What will the composition be? How much of the car will I put in there? What angle? What stylistic choices might be useful to bring that concept, whatever it was that appealed to me to light. So if I thought of a 1950s car, I think the design of the car would be a big deal to me. And there may be the reflections on the chrome and that sort of thing. So I might be wanting to do a very detailed drawing of parts of the car, but maybe not the whole thing. Maybe everything doesn't have to be treated that way. So this whole thinking of how would I go about it? What would I decide to do? And I'll be talking about some other examples as we go through this morning. But trying to actually realize that there's a decision process is so helpful, because that way when you're actually drawing or painting, and it doesn't matter what style you're using, that concept needs to come out in your drawing. You have to look at it at different points of time if you're trying to do a successful drawing and go, is that original concept that I saw or thought, am I actually achieving that? And if I'm not, and something else interesting is happening, am I just going to go with that? Because maybe I am. Maybe I'm going to abandon that original concept and do this instead. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to actually, think your way through the process. And that way, when you're doing the actual art, you don't have to worry so much about that, because in your head, you will already have decided a little bit of the path you plan to go down. So the how, that's the technical bit, the composition, what paper you're going to use, what drawing media, all of that sort of stuff. So I think for artists, our how is divided into how is it going to look and how am I actually physically going to do it. So just a few examples to go through of how we use abstraction to step away from realism, and then how some artists even take that further to almost complete abstraction or complete abstraction. And so in this particular case, the first way is to use abstraction to step away from realism. And that is what David Bomberg did. And so in both of these particular cases, he's like on the left, he's got this concept of the valley and the mountains, but those are not, and we know that, we can see that, the concept comes through loud and clear, but he did not do mountains in grays and blues and snow in white and all of that sort of thing that we would think is more perhaps symbolic of, when we think of the symbol of a mountain, we think of something, pointy that looks like an upside down ice cream cone with some white on the top, something like that. So abstraction takes you away from sort of those more symbolic and perhaps formulaic responses and tries to get something a little bit more individual about how you see and why you see it. Maybe you see colors that nobody else sees. That's fabulous, So don't worry if you're like, well, I think my mountains should be green, or orange or whatever. If there's something you want to try, I'm urging you to experiment it and try it. And so over here on the right, he's got, obviously the hospital is quite realistic, but he has abstracted that foreground because it's not as important to the overall detail. It's important to the design and the overall layout to have that slope going up. It's really beautiful, but he doesn't want you to dwell there. He wants your eyes to go right to where the detail is. And this is what eyes do. Eyes focus where the detail is. So this is how abstraction can be used in your drawing and painting. It can be a device that you use to keep people in on the bit that you want to have people really notice. It's also a time-saving device because you could draw every little tiny plant that is all the way up the hill to the hospital. Or you can go, hey, I really want people to look at the hospital. How can I make that happen? How can I use some abstraction to get there? So here are just two more examples of how he played around with different ideas, more abstracted, less abstracted, depending on what he was drawing and painting. And I'm showing you these because, so the one over on the left, that's very Maurice Wade-ish, isn't it? And the one on the right is really far more towards realism. But if you actually have ever seen pictures of Petra or been there yourself, you'll know there's quite a bit more going on in the rocks that he just left out. He just edited it out. So this is something you can pick and choose to use. You don't have to make stylistic, decisions about how you're going to draw for everything you do in the entire of your art career. You only have to make the decision for the one drawing that you're working on. So the second way is to use abstraction to address the form, but in a composition or design that is not dependent on realism. So we can see that this is a bull, right? But and there it ends. We have no idea what the scene is or anything else, but he's made this fabulous design out of it. So, and in this case, in this type of abstraction, the design becomes important, the overall look of the thing. And I want to show you something I thought was really interesting. So this is a series of lithographs that Picasso did. He didn't do them all in a row like this. They were separate ones where he takes those realistic objects and breaks them down in different ways. And each time he did it, he sort of did a slightly different kind of breakdown. Isn't this wonderful? So this is sort of that path to abstraction, and you can stop anywhere you want to. I mean, to a certain extent, even the ones he started with are not like what we would call photorealism, right? He's already started abstracting just because of what he sees about the form and the silhouette, what he thinks is important. So I thought this was just marvelous. So the third type is using abstraction to concentrate on the concept alone. And so this is the part, I think, where sometimes the audience has a little trouble because they're not sure, without reading, without a descriptive title, it can be difficult to know what on earth was in the artist's head. And so I've told you before that, my path to appreciating abstraction was a little rocky, and it got a lot better when I started reading about abstract art and reading, I would pick a few abstract artists who I liked and try to figure out what they were thinking of. And what I discovered was that the things that they think about with their work is really no different than how I think of my work, which is far more representational. We've got the same sort of thought processes, and there's a lot that can be learned. Now, that doesn't mean that every abstract bit of art, that I think every abstract bit of art is good. Likewise, I don't think every realistic bit of art is good. So don't feel that you're missing something if you really don't like something, but really like something else. You're not. That's your personal feeling, and it could be that other people agree with you. You may not be alone in that. So I urge you to have personal feelings about art, but if you're ready to throw an entire genre of art out the window, I would also urge you to perhaps stop and have a little bit deeper look at it and see if you can, discover something you do like. So in this particular case, Danny Augustine is an artist who shows his work on Saatchi.com, and I went there to look at some contemporary abstract drawings just to see who was doing what. And I thought this was really interesting. I particularly liked, I'm curious, I would like to know more about it, why did he make these choices? And I like very much these various different textures and colors he's used. And in this case, this is another piece of his, which I think is probably a little easier for me to understand, living in a moment of chaos. And I think this is really talk about a sensory response to chaos, right? It's interesting to look at the same time, and the design of it is fabulous. So, this is trying to break down abstract art and look at what the decision making might have been, as well as the overall piece, I think is instructive when you're playing around with abstraction yourself. So moving on to this artist, and I'm hoping I don't mangle his name entirely. So Francisco Villa Gil, and he has a wonderful set of drawings also on Saatchi.com of various different types as well as paintings, and they are often very scientific and organic based concepts. So this one of social connecting, I thought that was just marvelous, and just the kind of a very peaceful but organic way of approaching the subject matter. And then this one over here on the right, I just liked the form of it. I just thought that was really lovely. And somebody says, what year is living in the moment of chaos? I'm not sure about that. I don't remember seeing an actual year associated with that. It definitely made me think of last year. So I'll have to go back and see if I can find out more about that artist. Now, these two pieces are by a German artist, Christian Caboose. And these, I would say both of these have a toe in representational art still. I mean, you can see on Flying that that looks like an interior of a cabin and you know, something going on there. And Pier in Expectation of Winter, I would say, you know, I'm a person who spends an awful lot of time around a harbor front, and I can see the shapes, and I can see the pilings, and perhaps where the deck and the pier itself is, you know, maybe some boat type of shapes. So looking into it, I can kind of discern some of those shapes. But apart from that, both of these are just really great design. They're mixed media. He's pulled in, you know, ink and gouache or something similar, as well as charcoal and pencil. You know, so overall, these are wonderful mixed media pieces that are conceptually based, even though there's a tiny little bit of representational art in there. And now, lastly, I want to show this artist, Ash Woodworth, is a person who is out in British Columbia in Canada. I'm pretty sure it's Vancouver. And Ash's work is some of my favorite abstract drawing work. So it's so very conceptual, and yet there's something very peaceful and serene about it. And I've included the sizes because I want you to see that some of these abstract drawings are actually quite large. I think it's difficult to do what we're trying to do in class, which is to draw in front of us in a small amount of time, in a small way, and to get a large concept across. So this idea of pour, I don't think any of us could miss that, right? That idea is really wonderful. I don't know whether her work is, whether she thinks of the concept first or does the drawing and then something sort of comes to her as she goes. I imagine for different artists, it's a different sort of way. But I love the design and just the interesting strokes and direction of the whole thing. It's simple and complex at the same time. And here's another one. This was untitled. You know, to me, it makes me think of a waterfall coming down over rocks. But once again, this is abstraction. This is an abstract drawing, in the sense that, you know, there isn't a particular. We don't see a scene with woods and other rocks and things that make us know completely. But because of our combined sort of understanding of the outside and wilderness, we can see something that looks waterfall-like about this. This one also, you know, she's called it, this one, Heaven 01. And she's done it on a round wooden panel. And it's just about a foot wide. But I really loved that feeling of, you know, of going to the skies, that kind of nova sort of feeling that she's managed to get, that the abstraction that of this idea of heaven that she's managed to achieve. And then lastly, this one, The Meeting Place, which I think is just fascinating because I'm like, who's meeting there? You know, was she meeting somebody in a place that looked like this? Are there creatures that meet there? You know, I just love that. I like the fact that the name itself lends itself to this drawing, and that you could sit in front of this for a while, and at the size, which is 22 by 26, which is really large, I'm sure seeing this in person, you could see quite a bit of detail just in the graphite itself, and trying to think of the process. If you look at this over time, you start to see in that shadow area that there are many, many dark values within that shadow where she's shown even more organic forms. So all of this leads us to where we're going to be doing our drawing today. And so what we're going to do for the next half hour, and oh my goodness, I've timed this perfectly, is I've got a series of 5 video topics, and I'm going to be playing video. It's one long video that I've just made together of different topics that are everything is moving. And each different of the 5 subjects, what I want you to do is on your page, make, 5 little blocks Sorry, 5. Sorry, I was carried away because I was looking over here to see if my cell tower is still operating like it should. Okay, to make a series of little blocks. It can be 4 on a page or 6 on a page, depending on how big your page is. And what I'd like you to do is think about the concept that think about what you're looking at, and try to do these little drawings that are sort of your reaction to what you're seeing. So if we talk about the what, why, how, what is fire? Because I've picked that for you. Why? Like, why do you want to abstract fire? So, perhaps you're doing a drawing that is more realistic of a firestorm, or of a cozy scene, or a campfire, or something like that. Now, you could draw exactly what you see, like a photo, or you could draw the cozy campfire like a Campfire Girls logo, crossed pieces of wood, and here are the flames. But it's, I think, useful and better to go even further than that by thinking about the concept of, for example, the concept of a firestorm and how that might make a person feel, and what are the shapes and the colors and the values that would imply to someone the fury and the fear that would come with experiencing a firestorm. Likewise, a cozy fire, what the warmth and the softness and the comfortable and the comforting feeling of fire from that point of view. And so there are many, many reasons why we would want to think about the subject matter we're about to draw, but think about it in a conceptual form, even if we're going to try to draw something realistic, because we want the rest of our drawing to echo the same sort of things. So if we wanted something that was somber, we might pick dark colors, dark values. We might make the whole design kind of dark and dimly lit. If we wanted something happy and light, we might make something very light and cheerful. Our lines themselves that we draw may be sort of springy, and not dark and heavy and that sort of thing. So all of this idea of having a concept in mind helps you draw in a way that emphasizes that concept. So we are going to start with fire. And the stylistic choice today will be abstraction. So I've taken all of the other ideas off the board. We're not going to try to do this realistically. But what I'd like you to do is react to the subject, but keep your eye on design, on the notan. So while you're doing the shapes of fire, also, as you've seen I did very, very, very quickly, I darkened in some areas so that I ended up with these little compositions that work by themselves. Now, the reason why I want you to do this is because if you were then to do a drawing based on fire, you would look at maybe a photo of fire or the video, have that playing, and then you would look at one of your compositions that you really liked and try to sort of meld the two of them together. So this is your own take now. You're stepping further and further away from the realism you see, and you're using your own take to be the basis of your more developed artwork. If you get used to doing this, it doesn't matter whether it's representational art or abstract. If you get used to using your sketches in this way to step away so that your drawings and paintings are closer to what you see, what you think is interesting, what your idea of a good composition is, you will start to develop your own unique style without even having to think about it. So that's why I'm making you do this. That's why I've forced you through notan all summer long. Okay, so we're going to start off with this. Each time the video is going to play rather quickly in succession, because these videos are quite short, just like 30 seconds or a minute long. They're going to play twice in real time, and then there's going to be a longer one that lasts for 3 or 4 minutes where I've slowed it down and we do it in slow-mo. So I've followed that format for all 5 subjects. So let's go ahead and get started. And let me hope everything works just like I need it to. Okay, so here's the first one. I'm going to go ahead and start playing it. For the first go through, before it starts slowing down, just look at this. Okay, just watch it. Watch how fire works. And this is the observe part. You know how I'm always saying observation and practice is the key to mastery. And observing isn't just looking and trying to record. Observing is going, well, what the heck is going on here? What do these shapes do? And then how am I going to get them onto the canvas? So as you guys start drawing, I'm just going to keep track of time as we go. So first, just spend a little time just looking looking at the fire. It's rather mesmerizing, isn't it? And like I said, it'll loop twice, although it might be hard to see where that looping happens with some of these subjects. So look at those forms and those shapes. How would you, okay, just loop. So we're watching it again in real time. So I'd go ahead and start drawing out your little squares on your page. And then as it goes into slow motion in just a minute, if you had to do an abstract drawing of fire based on what you see, how would you go about how about doing it? So I think we're slowing down now. How slow is it going to go? It's going to go pretty slowly because I wanted you to have time to see the forms. And we'll just let that play it'll go for about 3 minutes. Even at slow motion, it goes by pretty quickly, doesn't it? So while you're doing this, I'm going to chat in your ear so that I'm the distraction that stops you from thinking overly about what you're looking at, and just tries to get you to respond to the shapes and the overall feeling that you're seeing. So, like I said, I'm really interested in pulling in abstraction, not just because of, hey, you might be able to do some beautiful abstract drawings, using mixed media. Now, the mixed media aspect of this, as you're getting started today, your first few are probably just going to be in regular pencil. But as we get into the different subjects, and even on this one, if you want to try, like maybe you do your basic little sketch in pencil and then you add some charcoal in, or you add some Conte crayon or something like that, just to sort of see how maybe the softness of charcoal adds something or doesn't add something to what you're trying to do. So these little drawings that you do are not just your reaction to what you're seeing and trying to get a good design, but you're also sort of auditioning your materials, auditioning your various different drawing media to see which ones are going to make it work. And the reason that I'm so keen on you doing this is because you'll be able to enhance your subject matter that you draw, no matter what it is, if you've taken some time to not just, go, hey, okay, I need to copy this, but to go, what other drawing material might actually make this look more like, bring out that concept that I'm trying to draw. So even if it's a distant pathway down a road, or a path into the woods or something, perhaps that same idea of using a little charcoal or something fading off, even if the rest of the drawing is done in a different drawing media, might help enhance that feeling. Maybe the distant misty mountains should be in charcoal, but the stuff that's up closer is going to be in the various different harder pencils. And then maybe I throw in some gouache or something on the top, or some white charcoal pencil on the top to add a different look in certain places. So the idea is that when we start drawing, to begin with, most of you are probably going, Elizabeth, I'm just trying to draw these flames. Give me a break. What do you mean add mixed media in? But the idea is that during the course of playing with different media and experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't for you, I want you to start getting a feeling that you have confidence and are in charge of your tools, and that your tools are not in charge of you. And I know charcoal is one of those that I mentioned before, and I'm finding Conte crayon to be the same way, where sometimes the tool is definitely in charge of me. I have to pay attention to what it does. And to begin with, there's a fear. You're trying to get Conte crayon to do what pencil does, and it doesn't. So how do you make that work? But what I found, for example, with that little sketch that I did trying to do the building last week, was that when I slowed down and figured out what Conte crayon would do for me in that instance, that I could very carefully smudge it with a Q-tip to get that flat look, I filed that information away for the future to see what I could do next. Okay, I think it's going to play just a little bit faster now for this last minute. I think on all of them, I was able to do the last little bit just a little bit more at real speed, and then we'll move into the next one. So when you see them speed up like this, you'll know that this particular topic is over. You can flip the page and get ready to do the next one in just a minute. And at the end of the video, I've actually, and I'll send it with a PDF, I've got the website that I found all these free videos on, because if you want to try this yourself, there are thousands and thousands of different videos on any subject. And you could, and it's interesting, I think, to try to draw things in motion, because things often are in motion, you know, birds, butterflies, you know, blowing grasses. And abstraction is a way to get yourself, if you take a photo, you'll end up, you know, following the lines exactly as you see very statically. But trying to draw something that is in motion, I think, gives you a way to try to get the idea across. Okay, now we've got rippling fabric. So we'll watch this a couple of times at real speed, and then it'll slow down. So, you know, once again, this is the idea of if you were drawing like a fluttering flag or clothing that is fluttering, or the wind is moving curtains that are blowing in the window, or you just want an interesting design that happens to be based on fabric moving. Because some of these, here we go again with the fast, oh, okay, now we're slowing down. Sorry, this is the slowed down version. It'll go for 3 or 4 minutes. So as you're doing this, particularly on this fabric one, in 3 classes from now, we'll be talking about folds and fabric and all of that. And the idea of how fabric moves, like where the light is coming from, where the darks are, all of that. That's something to sort of key in on fabric in general. But in this particular case, I want you to look at this just from the design aspect. You know, the idea of fabric moving, the idea of the shine and the folds, and how does that work? How does it work as it moves across your page? And I think, you know, any one of these sort of like images would be an interesting jumping off point for an abstract drawing or painting. So I very much like this idea of doing these small sketches with the idea that if they stay in my notebook, that at some point when I feel like doing, you know, maybe I'm just feeling the need to be abstract, whether it's a drawing or painting or whatever, that I can look back at one of these sketches and go, okay, hey, that was a good jumping off point. I'll take that one today, even if it's something I sketched 2 years ago. So you don't always have to start the process from dot. You know, you don't always have to begin at the very beginning. You can use these sketches you do to give you jumping off ideas later on. And I think it's really important to not feel that we've got to climb a mountain every single time we want to get to the summit. If we've, you know, if we've already established that, you know, that gondola car to get us almost up there, let's take the gondola car. So this will keep going for a little while longer. Now this one is, I think, particularly good for using or trying out some of those softer drawing media you might have. And even though it's moving and you can't actually, you know, stop it and then draw exactly what you see, that the idea of the lights and darks, the softness, some hard edges in there, I think is fascinating to try to capture. Now it'll do it a little bit, I think it'll play it again, but just a little bit sped up, which means that we'll be moving on to the next subject soon. I'm not exactly sure how I timed all of these. They weren't exactly the same because every video didn't allow me to extend it to, you know, exactly 5 minutes or something like that. So that's why we're sort of winging it. I was talking with one of the attendees who might be here today a couple of weeks ago about just practicing drawing, no matter what it is that you're drawing, even if it's just doodling, even if you're not sitting down to do something serious and bringing out all your drawing subject, you know, just to keep your hand moving, you know, keep that flexibility in your hand, keep those muscles warmed up, because that way when you do sit down to draw something, you know, more serious, you're already ready to go. I'm finding these drawing classes actually to be really useful myself, because while I go through, you know, maybe drawing something like the gannonoak or doing some other stuff like the silver point, I've quite taken to silver point, and I've been doing a lot of it ever since the classes started. That my painting later in the day is much better because I've already got my hand warmed up. I'm already ready to go. And I had heard before, stories about, there's always those myths about certain artists spending hours drawing before they would start painting. But it is actually quite a nice warm up first thing in the morning to do some drawing, even if it's not, even if you don't finish a drawing, you just work on it a little bit and then move into something else you're up to. It's just a really nice way to start the day. All right, I think Fabric's going to be wrapping us up for us in a minute here. And I'm trying to remember what the next subject was. We did a lot on fabric here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is a subject matter that is difficult to draw. And for those of you either live in a coastal area or go to the beach, it can be very difficult to do something which isn't one of those symbols that we talk about, which is the curling wave, right? So just watch this for, the first couple will be at speed, and then it'll slow down. And once again, what I'd like you to think about as you're sketching your small drawings is not, oh my gosh, I've got to try to draw a realistic wave. That's the last thing I want you to do. What I want you to try to do is look at what is the feeling of a wave. That's nice and touchy-feely, isn't it? Isn't that nebulous? But what is the movement? Maybe that's a better word. What is the movement that the wave makes? And you start to notice how that water goes back underneath, right? There's something that goes back underneath, something that comes over the top. There's the residue of the water. All of these things become design elements. They become potential things, movements of shapes. So if you find yourself starting to actually draw waves, if it's starting to look like I could look at your drawing and go, that's a wave, break it down, perhaps concentrate a little bit more on the movement of the thing. Okay, now here we go with the slowness. And this is what I mean, it's sort of that upsurge. Like, what are the pencil strokes? What is the drawing medium you have on hand that gives you that feeling of this powerful, it's probably 6 inches high, but if it was 10 feet high, how would it be? This wave is crashing over. You've got this secondary push of water. You've got this other kind of formation, this other design line coming through there. And then you've got the evening out that comes after it. And how would you show that? Maybe you would pick different parts of it to show in different ones of your sketches. But so once again, the reason I'm showing you this particular scene is so that when you are drawing or painting water, that you can put just maybe even a few pencil marks down to get that feeling of the water coming in. Or if you're painting, a few paint strokes to get that feeling of the water coming in. Now you may decide you want to go further than that and do something more representational and put a lot more detail in. But if the underlying feeling of your painting or the underlying feeling of your drawing is the bigger movement rather than the smaller movement of the tiny little ripples and the bubbles as they come up and this, that, and the other, your overall drawing or painting will be more successful, because the concept, the idea of water coming up on the beach and receding, the underlying idea will be there. And then how much detail you need is just depending on how you feel that day. I think it's important to talk about this idea of concept beneath a painting, or even beneath parts of a painting. Like I might be doing a landscape and there may be clouds scudding across the sky, water coming up on the beach, birds flying. There might be like a peaceful look to the meadow behind this scene or in this scene. Each one of those has a different sort of concept behind it that lends itself to the whole. The whole might be this gorgeous day at the beach or something like that. But each one of those parts, if I get the underlying feeling behind what I'm looking at, it will get me away from drawing individual blades of grass and individual seagulls and individual clouds. And I will be able to do something that's my sort of take on how it all works, even if I still end up with a realistic painting at the end. Or I could go completely abstract and just base it all on these concepts and movements and think about it from a design aspect, the design of the movement of the clouds, the movement of the grasses, the water coming up onto the beach. All of those things I might end up with a drawing or painting that if you looked at it, you may not know off the top of your head what I was thinking and until you saw the title. But you might be attracted to the design of it because I've used these flowing motions and these things to bring it all together. So concept isn't just about, I'm going to draw a tree. Concept is about, I'm going to draw something about the growth of the tree or the decay of the tree or the blowing of the tree, something else that's going on, the activity or the lack of activity, the calmness, the stillness, and try to use the drawing media that I select from whatever it is I have and the way I draw, dark, light, soft for peaceful. If you think about Ash Woodworth's drawings, for example, and how peaceful the bottom part of pour was, because that's when whatever was being poured is sort of dissolving, or you can't see the individual pieces, but there's a concentration of whatever is being poured at the top. And that kind of idea and how you're going to actually do it in the media you have on hand. It could be the ballpoint that is in your glove compartment when you see something interesting sitting in the ferry line, which happens to me all the time. But it's interesting because as I'm explaining these things to you, I'm also finding for myself that I'm being more careful about asking those same questions of my own drawing and painting and trying to get to the why things are happening. And we're doing this one on water. I think the next two are also water-based, but in different sort of ideas. And once again, all we're looking for, just keep drawing. If you filled up your squares, do a few more. We're just looking for this whole reaction to what you're seeing, the idea of the surf and the different interesting designs, interesting little notan you can make based not on what you see in terms of light and shadow. Oh, here we go. Here's the next water one. So isn't this cool? This is a paint being dropped into water. And I just think this is fascinating. So we'll watch this a couple of times at high speed, and then we'll watch the slower one, which will play for about 5 minutes. So not only the original pouring in, which has its own kind of globular sense, but also this aftermath, this wispiness, which is just really amazing. And can't you just see a fantastic abstract drawing being made from this, where you could really explore all these lights and darks and the values, and what you would end up with, nobody would know what it was from, but during the course of your actual drawing, and unless you put it in the title, but you could make a fabulous design, and during the course of it, emphasize this whole concept of something being dropped into water and the pigments and the paint particles, dispersing as they do. So now this is the slow-mo version. And I'm going to take a swig of my coffee while you guys are drawing. Okay, I think this one doesn't play for as long. This is sort of a one you've got to do kind of fast, if I remember correctly. I wasn't able to get one of them to go very long at all, but we'll just sort of see what you can get. You'll always be able to watch this on the video afterwards. And what I'll do in the PDF is I'll send a couple of screenshots of each one of these, because of course it won't play in the video, and that way if you do want to, to try, but just, if you can, try to keep to the abstraction rather than the realism. Try to respond to the forms rather than necessarily drawing all the details. Although I've got to admit, if I were drawing this one, I would be in there getting those darks and those lights, because I would know that even through that kind of process, I would end up with something that looked, that had some realism to it. So, that had some abstraction to it. All right, this is playing for a bit, so that's good. And so just to continue on that whole theme of, keep sketching and drawing, anything at all. Make things up out of your head, draw things you see, think of words, like ice, fire, comfort, dark, whatever, and try to come up with the words and maybe a tiny little sketch of how you might go about showing that something was this type of emotion or that. When you think of a subject you'd like to draw, and perhaps it is a tree outside, I think it's good to also think, well, how could I make that as interesting as possible? Could I look for the tree at a certain time of day, perhaps when the shadows are particularly long? There's an artist whose work I love here on the island. Her name is Jean Staples, and her paintings are beautiful. And she loves a particular time right around dusk. And many, many of her paintings have the long shadows from that time of day. And I like about 9 or 10 in the morning. And so a lot of my paintings have that kind of light, the rising sun and the shadows from that time of day. Other artists particularly like, high noon, where the light is very evenly distributed over the tops of things, and there isn't a big shadow base. And so all of that stuff starts to come into play, because those things like shadows become design elements for you to use and to create an atmosphere. So for Jean, if you look at her paintings, if you ever get a chance to see them, they are, and she has a website, and she's also showing at the Granary Gallery. There's a peacefulness to her scenes. They're not populated, kind of like Maurice Wade. They're not populated with a lot of people, or if there are people in, they're enhancing the mood of the painting. And so as you do the drawings and such that you like to do, other objects and such can come into your drawings, or can be taken out of your drawings, or can be manipulated so they're doing things that you want in your drawings to enhance whatever the mood is that you're after. And I think this is a way to take representational drawing to that next step, and painting as well, to take the tree from it's a beautiful tree to it's a beautiful tree, and the design of the composition is good because I've actually incorporated these other elements, such as shadows or the feeling of the stillness of the forest, which maybe I made by doing a little mixed media with a softer background to get the feeling of peacefulness. But my main tree is more enhanced and has more detail, so my eyes go towards that. So I know I'm talking away about all of these different ideas about how this can work. And you'll see a lot in figurative painting these days. A lot of artists are trying to merge abstract art with realistic art. And you'll see a lot of, sort of that painted over of a realistic face, that kind of thing, which is interesting. And keys very much, I think, on how we think in general of abstract art, that what we think of in a somewhat formulaic sense about what abstract art is. What I'd like you to do is to move beyond that and to think about abstraction without necessarily saying, hey, I'm going to throw some paint at a canvas and then I'm going to paint something realistic on top of it, which is fun and interesting. There's no doubt about it. And some people do it really well. But I think when you see a lot of people doing something really well, it's time to go, well, gosh, how can I add to this conversation? How can I add my own take and do something that might be a little different? So there's a lot of benefit to looking at other abstract art and to looking at what other people are doing. But there's also a great deal of benefit to just messing about, getting your pens and pencils and paint and all that out and just sort of going, well, what happens? What kind of mess can I make? And then after I've made a mess, what worked in here that I could try again and that I could use again? So and even for example, I did that sketch, trying to do a Maurice Wade concept. And the first thing I realized as I was into it, I should have gone with a slightly darker background paper, because I wasn't really getting the full range of his lights and darks by doing it the way that I did. I used a toned paper, but I didn't really go dark enough. So now I'm desperate to try it again, or with a different scene, something different. break it down the same way, try to restrain my amount of detail, because I think buildings and trees and things like that, we have a tendency to put a lot of information in that's not needed. Okay, now we've got dropping water. This is the last one for today. We'll watch it a couple of times in speed. The idea of water coming down. This is the bottom of the waterfall. This is the tea hitting the teacup. It's just looping through a couple of times, and then we'll watch it going much slower. And that'll take us to the end of the class. So once again, focus on the design of this, the feeling of the water, of the bubbles, of the splash that you get at the bottom of this, of the water, rippling towards us. Now we're doing it in slow-mo. And you can see how there's some fabulous, fabulous designs here. And with the dark background, it's like ready-made, really good ideas for no-tan. Oops, did I pause that by mistake? I think I did. Oops, sorry. There we go. Okay. I was being clever trying to look at the chat, and there we go. Did I stop it again? I did, didn't I? Okay, all right. I'll keep my fingers away from the chat for now, and I'll look at the questions after we finish. Sorry about that. And I've got a last word on this whole business about sketching all the time, is sketch anything. And I came up with a slogan. So I've got my little slogan, draw on, for Summer of Drawing. Well, I thought here's a good one for your sketchbooks to note down, and that is see something, sketch something, which I think is a marked improvement on the other version of that phrase that we're always hearing. But it's the idea of how this happens to me all the time. So I'm imagining it happens to you. You see something and you go, gosh, I'd like to draw that. And then you move on, right? You keep doing whatever you were doing. You're looking at, gosh knows what it happens to be, or you're walking somewhere. If you carry that little notebook, that little sketchbook with you, or and even take a photo, even taking a photo of it, if you really are in a hurry and you can't stop. But if you can stop, just for long enough to do one of these little squares, just like we're doing right now, to get the concept down of what you saw, just in its abstract form, of what was interesting. The shadows were coming down on the side of the building, and there was this light here, and this guy was walking. And then you take a quick picture. Maybe you do two things, and then later on, that initial impression that you had of the scene will come back to you so much more clearly, regardless of how well the photograph turns out. Because, as I've said before, and it happens to us all on our vacation pictures, we come home and they don't really capture what we saw. Sometimes we take a photo and the colors are dim, or maybe it's too big, and what we saw was small, but we took this big picture, and what we actually were looking at got lost, and we forget, hey, zoom in and have a look at that thing that was actually interesting. And so we sit down and start drawing or painting this thing that doesn't capture at all the feeling that we had. And then we wonder at the end of it, why that didn't work out. So it's all in the upfront work. Preparation basically is everything when it comes to a successful drawing or painting, including abstract. So when you're working you're trying for this concept, you don't necessarily always know if you're going to start out going towards realism or towards abstraction. You don't really necessarily know what the materials are you're going to use, but keying in on what's interesting to you, and then figuring out how can I best show that. Do I show just a little bit of it and everything else is more abstracted, by either fading out or trying one of these different methods we've looked at. This is a little bit faster version, just so you can see it in motion again. Making those decisions, and then starting on the drawing, and knowing that, hey, your path may diverge from whatever your notes were, but if you are getting lost, you can look back at those the little visual note taking that you did, or words that you wrote down and get yourself back on track. Or you can go, hey, that was a really good jumping off point, but I'm actually having a lot of fun going in this direction, and I'm just going to keep going that way. But it'll stop you, I think, from having that frustration that comes along where you wanted to do something on a particular concept. Maybe it was peace or gosh knows what it was. And it's just kind of looking, it isn't successful. It isn't going anywhere. You've made a bunch of marks, but they don't say anything to you, never mind to someone else. So this idea of trying to key off some words, a concept, an idea, something that you've seen, say it was peace, something that you think is peaceful. How could that feeling of that peaceful scene be conveyed without realism to whatever it is you want to do? Okay, all right, everybody, time to stop sketching. Let's just wrap up abstraction here. So look for interesting ways to draw interesting subjects without having to always resort to intense realism. The same knowledge you have acquired can still apply: angles, proportions, shading, line, and composition. So very much what we saw last week was the angles and proportion and shading part. Today it was more about the line and composition. But look for the design shapes that please you in a scene and just draw those. Don't worry about the rest of it. And you'll start to see now, as you look at other people's art, particularly contemporary realism, how artists are working with this. And you can see how they're trying different things. And I urge you to try different things as well. Incorporate mixed media, but it's just really a matter of thinking what's going to work best. You've just expanded your toolkit this summer by tenfold. And now you've got all of these different media. Which ones are you actually going to use? And this is really a place for experimentation. And you can do it at a small scale, you can do it at a large scale, whatever you would like. And this type of work will improve your drawing skills no matter what style that you work in, because you'll be tuning your eyes into the design possibilities in the world around you. And that is sure to make your artwork much more successful. So let me just quickly look at chat. Okay, I think we've covered the material there. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for the moment. Okay, folks, that was super. That was something different and kind of difficult, wasn't it, to try to capture something like that when it's actually moving. So we're going to be moving on from this now next week to colored pencils and drawing organic forms, plants, vegetables, and that sort of thing, in part because we have so much of that around us and available. It's a great way to move into talking about colored, either for drawing or painting. But even if you're going to just draw along with pencils, the whole idea of observing and we can be very scientific about it, or we can be very, we can go off in our own direction. There are many ways to approach the subject, and colored pencils are really a great way to get us there.